Hey guys, Kyle, the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for Fire Force Episode 2. So, yeah, the second episode of Fire Force, and I promised do plan, I definitely plan to keep you guys, updated, a little, I do plan to keep you guys up to speed on the adaptation, and once again, it was a pretty good episode. Although one thing I will say, in pretty much between the first episode and this episode, one thing I immediately clued in on is that the way that basically David Production is handling this adaptation is that for the most part that they're pretty much keeping the pretty much core aspects of the story in so far they're keeping a lot of the core aspects of the story in pretty much tact. From pretty much page from the manga to pretty much the anime, there's pretty much extremely small. There's extremely small differences. There's extremely small differences between the two. But with that being said, I think between these two episodes I've kind of got an idea what they're doing, which is that again they're keeping a lot of the core elements of the story intact. But what they're doing is essentially just trimming all the unnecessary bits almost. Like for instance, with this episode, like as we see, a lot of the main focus of the episode was pretty much was the pretty much main event of this episode was pretty much that was basically Fire Force Company 8 having to deal with pretty much a girl's father having transformed into an infernal, and even before that happened though there was a small scene in the manga where pretty much the girl had witnessed her pretty much father's had witnessed her father like transforming into the infernal. So that particular scene I just described, that was cut out. But so yeah, it's but yeah, everything beyond that, it was all kept intact. So like I said, I think what we're headed for is like an adaptation where just small little scenes here and there are going to be cut out, but as far as the story itself, majority of it is going to be kept intact. At least if what I've gathered from this. Although I will admit, it does kind of even if it's just small little scenes being cut out, it does kind of make me worried for the future if this is the way that David Production is handling it. But I'm sure it won't be too bad either way. And one thing I will say that I definitely took note of immediately as well is that David Production is kind of doing a little bit of the same thing that The Promised Neverland did of pretty much leaving chunks of monologue out, but unlike that particular case with this adaptation, what David Production seems to be doing is in a way they're pretty much keeping a lot of the important stuff, but pretty much leaving out just pretty much they're pretty much cutting out any kind of details that the studio feels that they can that the studio feels they can pretty much they can pretty much convey through the characters and through any kind of visual means. So yeah, they're cutting out dialogue obviously, but they're cutting out like a little bit. They're cutting out like dialogue of monologues, but again, it's the kind of dialogue you can kind of easily portray through like a visual means almost. And in that sense, I think it works. And at least they're not cutting out everything. Like I said, they seem to be keeping a lot of the important inner monologue in, so to speak. And that in a way already gives it a bit of more of an advantage over what happened with The Promised Neverland. Another thing now, having said that, one thing I did notice that isn't as easy is kind of a little harder to forgive, but luckily it only happens for like a brief moment. Is that within the early parts of the episode, there are pretty much actually a couple of visual cuts that did make the pacing and animation feel a little choppy. But the thing about these visual cuts is that they're so quick and so minor that it's one of those things where it is easy to forgive and even easier to in order to forget about it, in order to overlook if you're not paying absolute attention. With that said, there is something I need to address in terms of the series itself. Because after the first episode aired, there was after the first episode aired, I will say right off the bat, a lot of the feedback in terms of the series just based on the first episode, a lot of it was extremely positive, and they're very eager, and a lot of people from what I've seen, they seem extremely eager in order to go forward with this. But then there are also those who started creeping up and saying things like the story and characters weren't grabbing them just based off the first episode, and fair enough. But the thing, see, this is kind of the thing with Fire Force. It's really a series that where it's really one of those series where the first chunk of the story's focus, let's say around 15 or 20 chapters for pretty much argument's sake, is strictly focused on introducing us to the characters and building the world, while kind of intersplicing just little bits of the plot in between here and there. So it's kind of what I'm saying, I guess, is that it isn't going to be it's not going to be one of those that is really gonna that probably isn't going to grab you right away. Isn't going to grab you right away, but it will eventually, and you're going to have to stick with it a little longer in order to really get to the good stuff, because and trust me, it is after you end up getting past this point where things really kind of start to like pick up. But like I said, as a whole, like Fire Force is just one of those series is one of those shonen series where it's not like most shonen, and you just have to have a little bit of patience with it. You just have to stick with it, as weird as it sounds. So yeah, like. Obviously, I'm going to tell you guys in order to keep giving it a chance, but like I said, you just got to kind of stick with it just as much as you can, guys. In order to, like, I don't know, wait until, I guess, episode 5, I don't know. Now, the episode itself also dives a lot more into the different generations of fire soldiers in this episode, or more specifically, what basically the different skill sets each of the fire soldiers has. In Maki's case, as a second generation soldier, what Maki can do is essentially control and manipulate fire, but she can't create it. With Maki, any fire she controls, it has to come from an outside source. Whereas with the third generation soldier, with the third generation, like pretty much Shinra, he can actually create his own fire. But as Iris said, in terms of the ability itself, having this ability itself, it comes with the risk of it comes with the task of learning to control the printer's power and the flames themselves. Otherwise, you could seriously hurt someone. And I really like how this setup of the different generations. It already gives us an idea of the power scaling and pretty much how. And how even if the characters become Mondo, even if the characters become Mondo levels powerful, there are always going to be those pretty much simple limitations on them. As long as those simple limitations are there, like we're always going to remember that pretty much that pretty much the characters are going to have those. That the characters do pretty much do obviously still have to abide by certain rules with their powers, obviously. And as far as what the first gen, and obviously with this episode, obviously with this whole generation stuff, we obviously the people are going to ask us as to what the first generation is like. And to answer that question, let's just say there's a reason that they haven't been mentioned yet. You've actually seen the first generation, but they haven't been officially named the first generation yet, unfortunately. One thing I like about this episode too is that in many respects it actually exposed the truth of what being a fire soldier is really about, and how the whole religious aspect is little more than pretty much means for the it's little more than a means for the populace of Japan in order to feel comfortable with the idea of the fire soldiers destroying the demons that were once their loved ones. And when in reality, when it comes to defeating these infernals, there's really no exorcism aspect to it at all. It's really just killing them, and that's it. But at the same time, this is why I like the way that the whole idea of religion is used in this series, because it really carries that sort of a little bit of an element of basically a pretty much test of faith element to it, with how much a person is willing to believe that how much whenever an infernal is destroyed, it kind of begs the question of how much that particular person is willing to believe that their person's loved ones are at peace or in a better place, or in the Fire Force's case, see what they're doing as is justified, and they're really at least until the Fire Force can actually find a way in order to reverse the whole human combustion phenomenon itself. And and the best part about this is, as a viewer, we're kind of left to decide how we pretty much want to. How much we as ourselves even want to believe that what the Fire Force is doing is more than murder, or if it's just straight murder, or if there is just this kind of religious aspect to it. Like it's basically all left up to our perception and our own particular point of view as to what we feel is. As to how we feel that the whole religious aspect of the series works, if it works or not at all, really. But yeah, I really like that aspect, how there is this kind of test of faith element to it. It really works from the series itself. Now, we get introduced to two new characters. One of those is the eye patch guy, who appears later in the episode. And the best way I can describe this person to you, even without me giving anything away, is that he's very much like the Joker. He's going to be you're going to see this guy a lot, and he's going to be a long-standing rival to our heroes. And when he's compelling as hell. He's compelling as hell each and every time. And with each appearance, it's like with each appearance and each new thing we learn about this guy. It's one of those things where, or even when you learn something new, it kind of begs the question of basically how much of what he says are you supposed to trust, really. Like again, it's kind of putting that guest test of faith thing in there too. But yeah, it's really this guy is going to be one of the more intriguing characters for sure. And now, guys, I don't know if you remember when I said, but remember when I said in the first episode about how this series takes the things that worked in Soul Eater and either reworks or ditches the things that didn't? Well, that is on full display in this episode with the introduction of Arthur Boyle and his flame sword Excalibur. And when I first read this in the manga, you have no idea how big a sigh of relief it was to see that annoying little bastard reduced down to a non-talking weapon. It was just immediately a vast improvement to me, and don't get me wrong, with basically Excalibur, he was obviously more of a badass in the manga than in the anime, but honestly, the pretty much it didn't really matter to me. The pretty much annoyance of the character was just always there, and it always overshadowed how much of a badass he was to me. Like I just hated his guts. I really did. I just hated with his guts how annoying he could be. And now, granted, you could probably say that basically all the annoyance was basically transferred to Arthur himself with Fire Force. But honestly, I'll take annoying Arthur over annoying Excalibur any day of the week, month, or year. And thankfully with Arthur, he in this episode and even going forward, he really doesn't remain annoying all that long. But yeah, guys, that's my review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram Crunchyroll. Death Knight Anime, signing off. Later, guys.